Hello all, it's week 7. This is our last week of class. What I hope this class has demonstrated for you is that first, social entrepreneurship is an emergent and still evolving concept. And by that, I mean there are many definitions and approaches to it, and it's changing rapidly in our current technological and cultural and historical and pandemic moment. I think this complexity is a strength, but I also think it's important that entrepreneurial thinking and approaches are at the center of social entrepreneurship. Early on in class, I introduced some characteristics that MSU has identified as key to entrepreneurial thinking, like taking initiative, being willing to take risks, being flexible, being creative, learning from your mistakes, thinking critically, failing forward, and more. For week 5, one of our sparks was the table of contents from Kevin Johnson's book, The Entrepreneur Mind. And he identified characteristics like thinking big, asking for help, seeing technology as an opportunity, not a threat, seeking inspiration, realizing failure is an opportunity to learn and move forward, and more. What I hope this class has also demonstrated is that there's a lot of good happening in the world right now, undertaken by a lot of different people engaged in entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial ventures. There's room for each and every one of you to participate in this good and in this change, either by launching a social or cultural entrepreneurial venture or supporting a venture organization, or by making change within the company or organization in which you work or will work as an intrapreneur. The focus of our last week of class is on the future of social entrepreneurship. You've been asking fantastic questions all semester long on Packback that point us toward possible futures. Saketh asked, what do you think is the toughest problem we need to tackle as soon as possible? Catherine invited us all to consider, what hybrid social enterprise would you dedicate your life to creating? London asked, how do you stay motivated when your entrepreneurial journey gets tough? And our focus of this last week of class is on the future of social entrepreneurship, but also on continuing the creativity. How do you stay both motivated and creative when your entrepreneurial journey gets tough? Yue Tong asked, how can we find solutions faster to conquer barriers in social entrepreneurship? Jacob wondered, how do we transform video calling into a more creativity-boosting environment? And what's next beyond video calling, beyond Zoom or Teams video calls, especially to support connecting and communicating among social entrepreneurs? Lauren asked us to think about, with all the forms of communication our technological age has given us, why do we still have errors in communicating? I hope you all are inspired by questions like these, and it may be you who comes up with ways to address these issues and engage social good. Finally, Luke asked, how are social entrepreneurs and enterprises adapting to the new world? Most immediately, this new world is a world that's trying to emerge out of COVID, but where COVID variants are surging and wearing a mask has somehow become political. This world is a world where some cities are exploring what it looks like and means to defund the police, that is, shift some of the police budget to social services and crisis interventions. This world is a world where social media and apps have transformed our everyday lives and work and will continue to do so. It's a world where we're closer together than ever before in many ways, yet still exceptionally distanced and separate. These are great questions. Will social entrepreneurship be engaged by more and more individuals, organizations, and companies? Can we imagine a world where all businesses are socially and culturally engaged and there's not really such a thing anymore as social entrepreneurship, but just entrepreneurship, and all entrepreneurship is socially engaged? I'd like to think so. What tactics and approaches will help us make positive change in the world in the coming years, especially as we work to address the wicked problems, the large-scale problems that require multiple people, multiple fields, multiple vantage points to address? In this video, I want to return to what we talked about during week 1, how social entrepreneurship is defined and conceptualized, but with an eye toward what its future might look like. I'm also going to talk a little bit more about Project 4, our final class project, due this Friday. I want to talk just a bit here about the book Social Entrepreneurship, edited by Joanna Mayer, Jeffrey Robinson, and Kai Hockerts. This is a book specifically about social entrepreneurship, and the editors and authors don't even agree as to what it is. The editors open the book by talking about aspects of social entrepreneurship. that social entrepreneurship is undertaken by enterprising individuals devoted to making a difference, that social entrepreneurship happens in a range of ways, which we've read about all semester, including for-profit approaches to support nonprofit sectors for social purposes. Social entrepreneurship includes new types of philanthropists supporting venture capital-like investments, and it also includes nonprofit organizations reinventing themselves by drawing upon business concepts. These aspects or characteristics, again, should feel pretty familiar to you since we spent the last 6 weeks exploring social entrepreneurship. To draw from just 3 chapters in the book, Francesco Perini, a professor of management and sustainability at Bocconi University in Milan, Italy, and Claudio Vero, a student of business administration and management at the same university, suggest that social entrepreneurs are change promoters. They strive to exploit social innovation with an entrepreneurial mindset and a strong need for achievement to create new social value in the market and in the community. We might think of market as the entrepreneurial anchor and community as the social anchor here. Jeffrey Robinson, one of the book's editors and also a professor of management at NYU, suggests that social entrepreneurship is a process that includes the identification of a specific social problem and a specific solution to address it, the evaluation of the social impact, the business model and the sustainability of the venture, and the creation of a social mission-oriented for-profit or a business-oriented nonprofit that pursues a double or triple bottom line. And this resonates with some of the readings from class we focused on in regard to the need for assessment and evaluation, or as we explored last week, measuring the impact and implications of a social entrepreneurial venture. Christian Silos, a researcher with the Malik Management Center and lecturer in business strategy and social entrepreneurship at several European universities, and Kate Ganley, a research assistant at the IAH Business School in Barcelona, Spain, describe the social entrepreneur in their chapter as someone who identifies and applies practical solutions to social problems, innovates by finding a new product, service, or approach, focuses on social value creation, resists being trapped by the constraints of ideology or discipline, and has a vision, but also a well-thought-out roadmap as to how to attain their goal. And I like thinking of vision as the forest and the roadmap as the trees. If you remember back to week 5 when we talked about barriers and the need to be able to grasp the big picture and grapple with smaller details. Even though there isn't an agreed upon set definition here, we can see the trends that give shape to social entrepreneurship, identifying social needs, drawing on best practices from business, evaluating strategies and approaches, and innovatively measuring impact. As we've discussed in class, and I'm sure you've thought a lot about, one place where social entrepreneurship is critical is in our pandemic context, and looking toward a post-pandemic context where our lives and our interactions will be significantly changed. Another place where I think social entrepreneurship is critical to our future has to do with homelessness. In the U.S. specifically, right before COVID, there are a lot of news articles focused on the fact that although the U.S. had a pretty strong economy, homelessness was increasing and becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And of course, COVID has continued to change our economic context. The U.S. had an unemployment rate of more than 13% at the end of May 2020. The U.S. Center on Budget and Policy Priorities has been tracking COVID-related hardships in the U.S. since March 2020. They note that things did get better for many after the American Rescue Plan was enacted, but that 20 million American adults live in households that do not get enough to eat, and 11.4 million renters are behind on rent, which we saw really come to a head last week when the rent moratorium was set to expire. Our unemployment rate is different now, in part because people are wholesale rejecting some of the exploitive practices that our economy relies upon. If they can say no, many people are saying no to working long and unpredictable hours in miserable jobs with bad working conditions from minimum wage. You may have followed the story from July 13 of an entire staff of Burger King workers in Lincoln, Nebraska, who quit. Their general manager had put in her 2 weeks' notice already. 8 people quit with her. The workers described the conditions of the restaurant with a kitchen with no air conditioning that would hit over 90 degrees. The general manager wound up in the hospital being treated for severe dehydration before she quit. She regularly worked 50 to 60 hours a week. Back to homelessness, which right now is partly due to an affordable housing crisis, along with housing costing more than people make. Climate change and natural disasters like the wildfires out west have also had a significant impact on housing and homelessness in the past few years, forcing people to move, including to areas where housing is scarce. And of course, this isn't just a U.S. problem. This is a worldwide problem, impacting families and children around the world. Last year, a student who wrote her project about homelessness in her hometown in China pitched the idea of a hotel that would be staffed and run by homeless people from the community. In exchange, they'd receive food and board, lodging at the hotel, and they'd develop professional skills by running the hotel, customer service skills, cleaning and maintenance skills, cooking skills, and more. Homelessness is just one of the big wicked problems that we face and that social entrepreneurial approaches might help us address in the future. This isn't a problem that the nonprofit or government sector alone can address. It's not a problem that social services alone can address. Homelessness is a problem that requires a range of approaches, a constellation of perspectives, and good ideas and goodwill, and I would argue social entrepreneurial orientations and advocacy. Again, the product of Project 4 is an essay, 2 to 3 double-spaced pages, so a relatively short essay. You're going to want to think about a particular community, as the student did that I just described. Identify a need, issue, or problem in that community, and then pitch a social entrepreneurial idea to address that need, issue, or problem. Last week, I introduced Project 4 and shared the community I was focused on, the social issue I was concerned about, and mentioned my particular social entrepreneurial idea for addressing that issue. I've been continuing to work on my essay and created an outline of what I want to cover. First, I'll introduce the problem. I've been doing some research and finding some statistics about the Grand River and about sport fishing in Michigan's economy. I'd probably also try to find some information about fish species and protecting fish health, although I don't have that much room to cover all of this. Then I'll introduce my idea by explaining what hook and ladle would be. Briefly, again, not a ton of detail. I only have 2 or 3 pages, so I can't describe the menu or go into tons of detail. What I would be sure to do in the body of my essay is talk about the mission of Hook and Ladle and be sure how to explain how it's a social entrepreneurial venture. That's critical, social and entrepreneurial. And I wouldn't just say it's an example of social entrepreneurship. I'm going to include descriptions and quotes from class readings and materials to support my ideas. Maybe 2 or 3 really good quotes to anchor and shape my idea and explain how it's an example of social good and entrepreneurial thinking. And I'll conclude by offering some final points or ideas about the concept and what impact I hope it might have. Remember, you're proposing an approach that focuses on social and community good, but also an approach that leverages entrepreneurial thinking and generates revenue. You can potentially pitch a nonprofit approach to your issue, but if you do so, be sure to explain how you'll engage entrepreneurial thinking to fundraise and do the work of your organization. So those are 2 examples of Project 4, one from a student in this class in the past and one that I'm working on. While you're working on Project 4, our focus for this last week of class is the future of social entrepreneurship. Our first reading by Paul Light is called Reshaping Social Entrepreneurship, and he describes some moves we need to make for the future of social entrepreneurship. Our last 2 class readings are the conclusion chapters of 2 important books on social entrepreneurship. First, we're going to read the conclusion of Beverly Schwartz's Rippling, How Social Entrepreneurs Spread Innovation Throughout the World. In the conclusion, Schwartz talks about how social entrepreneurship can and should be cultivated. Then we'll read the conclusion to Georgia Levinson Keohane's book, Social Entrepreneurship for the 21st Century. And in her conclusion, Keohane really hones in on the role that the government might play and needs to play in cultivating social entrepreneurship and supporting hybrid organizations. Our case is another entrepreneurial project by an MSU alum. We're going to read about the York Project and take a look at Josh York's LinkedIn profile. We have 2 sparks. Creativity, as I've argued in class, is a key component to all entrepreneurial work, and creativity is something that has to be nurtured and fostered and cultivated. So our first spark is a piece on how successful entrepreneurs stay creative even in the midst of the day-to-day work of being an entrepreneur. Our second spark is a collection of podcasts called 50 Social Entrepreneurs Changing the World. Skim the intro, read some of the brief descriptions, and choose at least one of the podcasts to listen to. Again, Project 4 is our last class project. I consider it a capstone project. There's no final exam for class. In your Project 4 work, please draw as best you can from across our readings, cases, materials, sparks, and past class projects. Project 4 should allow you to both reflect, that is, look back and think back and reflect on what we've been doing and talking about and reading about the last 6 weeks. And it should allow you to think forward, applying what we've been reading and talking about and thinking about to address the particular issue and the particular community that you're focused on for the project. This week, class officially ends on Thursday. Your Project 4 essay is due no later than noon Eastern this Friday, August 20th. This is also a good time to take a look on D2L at your grades and the syllabus. And the syllabus explains how final grades are calculated. If you see any discrepancies or you have any questions, please text or email me. And of course, reach out if you have any questions about our Week 7 or Project 4 work.